to please take over.
Good afternoon, one and all. I welcome you to today's webinar. I, Advocate Rohini Apte, welcome you on behalf of Shri Vasantrao Patil Lawyers Training Center, supported by the Sangli Bar Association. This training center was established in the year 2019 in the honor of Shri Vasantrao Patil, who was a renowned criminal lawyer and ex-president of Sangli Bar Association. The center was established with the purpose of upgrading legal knowledge and for overall development of budding lawyers. With the spirit of achieving this end, the center has till date arranged a number of lectures of renowned faculties. And today, it's our great honor we bring forth to you a webinar of Honorable Chief Justice of Karnataka High Court, Honorable Abhay Ok sir. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Over to Abhinandan Vagyani.
Thank you. It is my privilege to introduce Honorable Justice Shri Abhay Ok. Honorable Justice Abhay Srinivas Ok did his BSc LLM from University of Bombay, enrolled as an advocate on 20th June 1983. He started practicing in Thane district in the chambers of his father, Srinivas Ok. In 1985, he joined the chamber of Shri V.P. Tipnis, a former judge of the Bombay High Court and former Lok Ayukta. He appeared in several matters and in public interest litigations. He was elevated as an additional judge of the Bombay High Court on 29 August 2003. He was made as a permanent judge from 12th November 2005. His lordship took oath as the Chief Justice of the High Court of Karnataka on 10th May 2019. To define him, Justice Ok is a man of integrity and a topmost upright, bold, and outspoken judge in judiciary. He delivered many landmark judgments, interpreting the provisions of law and developed social laws, making him one of the finest judge, recognizing him as one of the pioneer of judicial activism in recent era. He strived to expand the concept of justice and make justice that much more accessible to common people of the society. I would say that he is a judge of the people. His contribution is remarkable in developing the infrastructural facilities in the courts, which is extraordinary work, would be guiding factor for forthcoming judicial officers in judiciary. With this, I sum up and I request Honorable Lordship to deliver the lecture.
Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, a request was made by Mr. Vagyani to me to give a lecture in English, and to end with the last part of the lecture will be in Marathi. Mr. Vagyani, only one suggestion for you. My introduction could have been only in one line, that I have been a judge of the High Court of Bombay. Whereas that is the greatest honor which I got in my life. So one line introduction would have been more than sufficient. Now today, you know the subject. The subject is about reforms with special reference to Code of Civil Procedure and the present situation which has arisen due to COVID-19. I know that most of the members of the bar who are logged in today must have heard my lecture arranged yesterday by Thane Bar Association. So there is bound to be some repetition. Only difference was that yesterday I delivered lecture in Marathi and today the lecture is in English. I will repeat what I said on various public platforms when I was a judge of the Bombay High Court. In 1947, India became independent. In 1950, we introduced the Constitution of India. India became a democratic republic on that day, on 26th of January 1950. And several years after the independence, we who are members of the legal fraternity, after having worked as a lawyer for 19 years and judge for 16 years and almost 10 months, I really don't agree with this perception. We as members of the legal fraternity should not presume that common man of this country has great faith in the institution. That faith has eroded considerably during last several years. Now, one of the reasons why that faith has eroded is the procedural delay or in general delay in our judicial system. One reason for delay we always give, we talk about judge population ratio. We talk about the order of the apex court passed way back in 1982 and thereafter in 2002, which says that in India, the judge population ratio should be minimum 50 per million. In fact, direction of the Supreme Court was till 2002, we should have this kind of judge population ratio, 50 for 1 million. If you go by National Judicial Data Grid, today we may have 13 or 14 judges per million, which percentage in advanced countries like England, America, Australia is much more. There the judge population ratio ranges between 70 to 100 per million. So one reason which we always gave, and that is correct also, that low judge population ratio. Even today, we are facing lot many difficulties because we don't have adequate number of judges. That is one of the reasons which has contributed to huge delays in our judicial system. The second reason is lack of infrastructure. I'm talking it generally. As I said yesterday in my lecture, that perhaps in terms of infrastructure, we the judges of courts in Karnataka are far better placed than state of Maharashtra. The state of Maharashtra always has lagged behind, that is my personal opinion, in terms of judicial infrastructure, and that compelled me to write a judgment running into 200 pages dealing with judicial infrastructure. So that is second reason which we give, that we don't have adequate infrastructure. Third reason which we give is lack of monetary support, because judiciary, even for purchasing a paperclip, depends on the grant from the government. And this lack of funds, lack of financial support is going to become more and more prominent, because today we have a scenario where at least for 6 months or 1 year, we may not get enough money from the judiciary for running the judiciary. That is so in Karnataka, that is so in Maharashtra, because the government has cash crunch. So that difficulty is going to haunt us for quite some time, that we won't get adequate money from the state governments. Perhaps the money which was shared by the government of India, some 60-40 or 40-60, I don't remember exactly, for judicial infrastructure, even that money may not come. So we judges and lawyers will have to be ready for this kind of contingency, where we won't get funds. In fact, other day a written suggestion I received from one of the litigants, that the judiciary should create a fund, and while passing orders of cost, the judges should pass an order directing that that money should go to that particular account. Very interesting suggestion, but I have not examined the legality of such suggestion. Whether court will be able to do that, whether it will be legal, that remains to be tested. But very interesting suggestion I received, that let all costs go to this fund, which judiciary can itself utilize for infrastructure. I need to examine the legality of this. One more reason which has contributed for judicial delay, that is attributable to our procedural laws, and in the context of civil litigation, the Code of Civil Procedure. The reason given is that the procedure which is laid down in CPC or to some extent CRPC creates some kinds of procedural delays. Another reason which is given is, with which we are not concerned today, is that there are too many avenues available for challenging orders passed by our trial courts during the pendency of trial. There are appeals, there are revisions, there are writ petitions under Article 227. Then there is a remedy of SLP. So pending the final disposal of a suit or final disposal of a trial, there is too much of interference by the higher courts, and that impedes the progress of the trial. So these are all 5 or 6 reasons. And one more important reason, with which of course I will not be dealing with today, the time is very short, is lack of case management and time management. In our courts, lot of time is wasted. The time of the court is very precious, where we work for 5 hours, 5 hours and 30 minutes or whatever, it depends on every court. So every single minute of the court functioning is going to be important. And this last thing which I am telling you about the fact that time of the court is very precious will be very relevant in the present days, because the functioning of the courts will start depending upon the local situation in the state. But immediately we can't resume the functioning the way we were functioning prior to, say, 23rd of March. The courts will function for limited time. The courts will take minimum number of matters. For example, in Karnataka, now you will see that SOP on our website by Monday or Tuesday. We have provided that between, say, 10:30 to 11:30, about 10 cases will be taken by the High Court. Then there will be gap of 10 minutes so that the lawyers will have that breathing time. Gap of 10 minutes. Then again we'll resume at 11:40. Then it will go on for 1 hour. So now don't expect that whenever courts reopen, there will be sufficient time available. And therefore now it is going to be the most important duty of the members of the bar and the judges to ensure that not a single second of the court time is wasted. And therefore now there will be several constraints on the way lawyers function, the way judges are going to function. Now let me go to the topic that is reforms which are required in civil courts with special reference to the Code of Civil Procedure. All of us know that His Lordship Justice Krishna Iyer has said in one of the judgments that CPC is an ideal legislation which is suitable for ideal situation or ideal circumstances. And let us accept that the situation in our judiciary is not ideal. And therefore, we have to examine how this ideal legislation has functioned. Now, when it comes to CPC, let us identify broad areas which have led to the roadblocks or delays. I have also practiced for 2 or 3 years in the civil and district courts. I have practiced on the appellate side of the High Court. In fact, I have practiced for 19 years, which period is more than the period of my judgeship. And therefore, before I really touch all the subjects, I must hasten to add that the views which I am expressing today are my personal views as a student of law and as a member of a very large legal fraternity. These are not the views of Chief Justice of a High Court or views of a person occupying important position in the judiciary. The purpose of my lecture today is to set process of thinking. I want everybody to start thinking. Think about the reforms which we need. I may be making few suggestions which may not be exactly correct, which may not be exactly legal. But as I said, the object of today's lecture is to ensure that thinking process starts in the minds of those who belong to legal fraternity. Thinking process starts in the minds of young and budding lawyers who have a different perception about the court proceedings, different perception about the judiciary, which are far more different from person who has been part of the legal fraternity for 30 years, 35 years, or 40 years. So my appeal at the end is going to be, please start thinking process. Please find out what reforms we need. Now I go to the reasons which can be attributed for roadblocks in the context of provisions of CPC. Again, I said that these are my individual views as a student of law. Of course, I always say that as a judge also I have right to pass a wrong order, which can be always corrected by a higher court. So I have right to propagate views which some may feel are wrong, and they are entitled to say that my views are wrong. Now the first roadblock, as all lawyers who are practicing on the civil side know, starts from stage one. Now that stage one is of service of summons or notice. Someday we must analyze the data, and it's very easy. Now we have National Judicial Data Grid. We can take statistics of number of civil suits which are pending for service of summons. That is the first hurdle in the way of expeditious disposal of the case. Then there are several other hurdles. I mean, at every stage there are hurdles. The most difficult part, about which large number of litigants have grievance, is the execution part. After a long battle, a litigant succeeds. And then when it comes to the question of providing him fruits of the decree passed by the civil court, the execution becomes a very, very tough job. Executions are most time consuming. Service of notice in execution applications is again a task by itself. There are several roadblocks. I mean, we need to improvise on several things like deposit of the amounts in the court, withdrawal of the amounts from the courts, several things, maintenance of the record. So I wish to touch upon few aspects of it. Now let us first deal with the provisions relating to service of summons. In 2002, very important amendments were brought by the legislature in CPC based on report by His Lordship Justice V.S. Malimat. Now, since I am proud part of the Institution of Judiciary in Karnataka, I can proudly say that Justice V.S. Malimat is product of Karnataka judiciary. He is a very well-respected figure in legal circles who was the Chief Justice of Kerala High Court. His son, Justice Ravi Malimat, was also judge of the Karnataka High Court, who is now at present in Uttarakhand High Court. Now, one very important amendment which was brought by this amendment of 2002 was substitution of Rule 9 of Order 5, and a very innovative provision is introduced firstly by Subrule 1. I'm not going to read that. All of you are conversant with that. But what is important is it provides that when summons is ordered to be served, it should be served through officer designated by the court, or it should be forwarded to such courier services as are approved by the court. So now if you read Subrule 1 of Rule 9, it opens one more window. The service of summons either through traditional way of through officer of the court, that is through the court bailiff, or by courier services which are approved by the court. And when we deal with this part of the rule, Rule 9, we must also see Subrule 3. Now Subrule 3 is very important. Now Subrule 3 gives you various modes of service of summons. One is by sending it by registered post AD. One is by sending by speed post. One is again by such courier services as are approved by the High Court or by the court referred in Subrule 1. Court referred in Subrule 1 is the court which passes an order of issue of summons. And most importantly, the last part, any other means of transmission of documents, including fax message, electronic mail service. Electronic mail service is our email, provided by the rules made by the High Court. And with this, we have to read Subrule 6 of Rule 9. The High Court or District Court, as the case may be, shall prepare a panel of courier agencies for the purposes of Subrule 1. So therefore, see now how many modes are introduced for service of summons. One is traditional service through bailiff. One is through recognized courier service by registered post AD, speed post, and very importantly, by electronic mail service. Now, if courts want to order service of summons by courier or by electronic mail service, it is necessary for High Court to frame rules in terms of Subrule 3 of Rule 9. If my memory serves me right, as far as service through courier is concerned, Bombay High Court has framed rules by exercising power under Subrule 3 of Rule 9. If some registrars are hearing this dialogue, they will have to find out. Bombay High Court had also initiated a process for recognizing courier services. In fact, if I remember correctly, the rules are very, very modern rules. In fact, there are so many provisions. So many safeguards are there. The rules provide, for example, only those courier services which will be empaneled who agree that whenever court wants, person who serves the notice by courier will file an affidavit of service. Because perhaps that rule we have taken support of from Rule 19 of Order 5, which provides for examination of serving officer. So as far as Bombay High Court is concerned, state of Maharashtra is concerned, the rules are in place. Only perhaps one administrative part remains of recognizing courier services. I know that this service will have also limitation in the sense that courier service may not reach all villages. But nevertheless, there are courier services in state of Maharashtra which are connected to many important towns. But somehow, now 2002 is the amendment, 1st July 2002 it was brought into force. So almost for 18 years, though this facility is available, we have not used that facility. Now, before I go to the service of summons by electronic mail service, I remember a very interesting argument was canvassed by some of my former colleagues in Bombay High Court, by some lawyers. When discussion started about framing rules about courier service, the objection was very simple. Manipulations will take place. The courier services can be manipulated. They will create a false record. The person who actually serves the notice is an employee hired by courier service will play some mischief. My simple answer to that was whether mischiefs are not played in the existing system where bailiffs serve notices or bailiffs serve summons. Today we have a situation where if bailiff submits a report in a very typical language is used in the entire state, Samaksha tapas karta prativari advan ala nahi. Now, even if this remark is wrong, palpably false, we have no control. No control over bailiff writing such remark. Of course, now E-Committee of the Supreme Court has now come out with a app now. These handheld devices, Android devices will be given to process servers. They will take photograph, they will take signature. But still, you can't prevent a bailiff from saying that I went to a place and the person, defendant, was not found. So mischief can be played even by the traditional process servers. Same way, mischief by courier service is not ruled out. But because a provision leaves a window open for playing mischief, the provision doesn't become bad. It does not mean that we should not implement that provision. So for 18 years, this provision is there in the statute, on the statute book. We have not started use thereof. If actually we have started use, please pardon me, because I am really cut off from the state for last 1 year. But I don't feel that the use has started. Now the second issue is about electronic mail service. Before I do that, when it comes to service, we have ignored a very salutary provision, because the service difficulty about service of summons doesn't stop by effecting service of summons in the suit. The difficulty arises when there is an appeal filed under section 104 read with order 43, when suit is pending. The difficulty arises for service when regular appeal is preferred against the decree. Now there is one provision which was introduced, and in fact, the Bombay High Court has its Bombay Amendment, which is very interesting, which is rarely used. That provision is Rule 14A of Order 6. Now, Rule 14A requires that whenever you file a pleading, whether it is a plaint or written statement, you must furnish address for service. The Central Amendment says that that address will remain good for 2 years after a disposal of the suit for effecting service of notice on that address in appeal, which may be preferred against the decree. But Bombay High Court Amendment says, subject to correction, that the address will be valid for 6 years from the date of termination of the proceedings. Then there are several provisions in Bombay Amendment under Rule 14A. If the address for service is not properly furnished by the plaintiff, we have many cases where very vague address is furnished by the plaintiff in the plaint, or in the memo of address filed along with the plaint, or with the written statement when memo of, at the time of filing Wakalatnama, advocates files memo of address. Now there is a very salutary provision in terms of sub-rule 5 of Rule 14A that if default is committed for furnishing address for service, plaint can be rejected. In case of defendant, the defense can be struck out. Now this provision we are not being using at all when it comes to proceedings which are filed by way of appeal. Now it is high time that we start using this provision, because it simplifies the provision, it simplifies the procedure for service of notice if the notice is sent on a valid registered address. Now coming back to electronic mail service, which is provided in sub-rule 3 of Rule 9 of Order 5. Again, it contemplates framing of rules by the High Court. Of course, I am conscious of the fact that in rural parts of the state, many citizens, many litigants may not be conversant with operation of email account. They may not be having email account. But still, large number of litigants do have email account. And therefore, there is no harm if we frame the rules for electronic mail service. I suppose when I left Bombay High Court, the draft rules were ready. I'm not sure whether rules have been actually formulated and published, and whether rules have come into force. So the High Courts can exercise power under sub-rule 3 of Rule 9, frame rules for electronic mail service, and there can be also a corresponding amendment to Rule 14A of Order 5, which will require the plaintiff or defendant to furnish registered email address. There, of course, we can take care by providing that those who have email address, they must furnish it. In the present day situation, we may not be able to compel a litigant who does not have email address to furnish email address by opening email account. But still somewhere we have to make a beginning. So let there be rules framed under sub-rule 3 of Rule 9, providing for service by email. And there can be a amendment to sub-rule 14 by requiring party to furnish registered email address. In fact, in High Court, that provision is routinely followed, that when agency or instrumentality of the state are parties, like the government, the municipal bodies, the Jilla Parishads, statutory bodies like MMRDA or MHADA, they are parties. In High Court, practice is to serve private notice to those entities. Now, why we can't have a system, even in our trial courts, we may frame rules under, by exercising powers under section 122, High Court can do that, or we may even frame the same set of rules under sub-rule 3 of Rule 9, that in case of agencies and instrumentality of the state, now it is compulsory to have their websites. And if there should be a provision that service of summons to all these agencies and instrumentality of the state or statutory bodies should be by email on the official email ID of that particular agency or instrumentality of the state, which is published on the website. That will reduce burden on the system to a great extent, because we know that maybe 40%, 50% of cases, the state and agencies and instrumentality of state are parties, 50% litigants constitute this class. So I don't find any difficulty if we come out with this major procedural reform, that hereafter service of summons in civil matters or service of notice, maybe in appeals, revision, writ petitions, will be only in the form of email. All the courts now in Maharashtra are equipped with modern hardware. 3-in-1 computers have been given. I don't think any cause for complaint is there about availability of the hardware. There may be some issues concerning connectivity, but Wi-Fi connections can be taken for creating emails. If we have this procedural reform, maybe in 30%, 40% cases, we can avoid service of summons in the present form, like bailiff going to the office of the municipal corporation or in the Mantralaya or in the office of the collector. That is wholly uncalled for. So this reform can really come immediately. Now then, a very interesting argument is canvassed against providing service by email in case of private parties. I'm not saying about the agencies and instrumentalities of state. That interesting argument is, there are two parts of the interesting argument. First part may have some substance, because in case of service by post, there is some kind of presumption, statutory presumption is there. That presumption is missing in case of service by email. Of course, the legislature can legislate and create that. So first argument against service by email may have some valid basis. I mean, I feel that members of the legal fraternity can put their head together and resolve this issue. I mean, there can be amendment creating some kind of presumption. The other interesting argument, factual argument, is that if you serve, I made the same suggestion in one of the symposiums, that defendant should furnish his email address, which will be a registered address under sub-rule 14A of Rule 6. Argument was that which law says that every person should open his email account every day and find out whether he has issued email. I countered that argument by saying that if I have a house and on my outer door there is a post box where postman drops the letters, is there any law which requires me to open the post box? Can I heard to say that though there may be presumption in law, about service through post, but I have no obligation to open my post box. I'll open it after 15 days, once in a 15 days. The same argument applies to this email. See, the problem with our legal fraternity, which includes myself, that we are very, very slow in adopting changes. So it is high time now we should have major reforms when it comes to service of summons. In fact, about courier service also, there can be, please have a look at the rules framed by the Bombay High Court. There are built-in safeguards. There are built-in safeguards. If they are implemented properly, I don't think that the argument that somebody will play mischief, somebody will fabricate a record has any scope. Now, one more very interesting thing which I want to share with you. Now take a case of appeal. As I said, in appeal, we should take benefit of Rule 14A of Order 6, which we are not doing because that address, according to Bombay Amendment, subject to correction, is valid for 6 years from the date of conclusion of the proceedings of the suit. Now, the appeals which are filed pending the suit, like appeal under Order 43, Rule 1, or appeal under Section 104, there can be always a provision made that if in the trial court, party in appeal is represented by an advocate, the notice can be served on the advocate because it is an advocate's, it will be advocate's duty to communicate to the party that an appeal has been filed. This can be a mode in addition to regular service, because somebody will ask me a question, I'm sure about it, that which law creates a legal obligation that advocate, once he receives notice of the higher court that there is an appeal preferred in higher court, is duty bound to inform his client. Lawyer will say, no, I'm not able to contact my client. He has put off his mobile phone. He is not contactable. He is not traceable. But this will be additional mode of service in appeals. Ultimately, what is important is to think about those options which will streamline the process of service, which will expedite the process of service. One more interesting feature about the appeal. I have discussed that very often with the registrars in the Bombay High Court, my colleagues. If there is a delay in filing appeal, you know, Section 5 of the Limitation Act comes into picture. The notice of delay condonation application is served to the respondent. Now, if delay is condoned and if appeal is entertained, again, there is one more service. It happens in many cases where service of delay condonation application in appeal takes years. Person has to publish the notice by spending huge amount. Publish a notice in newspapers, not very easy. I mean, newspapers charge, the charges are very heavy. Now, if there is a delay of 10 days, and if the respondent is intelligent, he will say that why should I go to the court? And why should I engage a lawyer and pay money to a lawyer? 10 days delay, court is bound to condone, I will not appear. I will wait till notice of appeal is served to me. There are such intelligent litigants, day in and day out we see. So why can't we have provision that when there is a delay in appeal, application for condonation of delay is filed, there should be a procedural provision by amending Order 41 or by any other provision that the notice of delay condonation application will be accompanied by a copy of memo of appeal and other annexures to memo of appeal. And litigant should be put to notice that this will be only one appeal, one notice which will be served. If delay is condoned, there won't be any service of fresh notice. Ultimately, what is the object of serving notice? Object of serving notice is that a litigant against whom a litigation is filed is made aware of pendency of the litigation and he is given opportunity to appear before the court and to contest the litigation. So why can't we have this provision? That along with the notice of delay condonation application, memo of appeal will be served, and the provision will say and notice will say that this will be only one notice. If delay is condoned, appeal will proceed. So these are several, several options which we'll have to consider to curtail the procedure delays, because the senior lawyers who are online today or even junior lawyers will agree with me that it is this service of process of the court is taking long time. One hurdle earlier was that process fee. So myself and my colleagues who were elevated, we had 1 point agenda in those days with our senior judges that abolished the process, abolished process fee rules, because that was main hurdle for non-payment of some 11 rupees or 11.50 or 24 rupees. Notice is not sent. But there also sometimes, how the members of the legal fraternity react. Just in a lighter vein, I'm sharing this with you. When we, some of the judges of the Bombay High Court, started very vociferous campaign that let us get rid of these process fee rules, there was some opposition. Therefore, we said that let us have a rule which will say that a consolidated process fee in advance is paid at the time of filing of the matter. Some 50 rupees or 100 rupees. That will cover process fee of notices issued in the main matter, notices issued in interim applications. So I was told to interact with the members of the bar. We requested members of the bar to submit a response. So I received a letter written by about 30 lawyers raising strong objection for a proposed introduction of one-time process rules. I called those lawyers for discussion. I told them, look, what you have mentioned in your objection. The entire objection proceeded on the footing that the process fee is required to be paid by supplying postal stamps. They were not aware, they were not even aware that court fee stamps, court fee labels will have to be paid, will have to be given to the court for payment of process fees. So, innovative provision, one-time payment of process fee, was strongly opposed by members of the bar. Of course, now, with long struggle, we could get the rules frame abolishing the process fee. So that was one that actually got rid of one hurdle. So there is much to be said about the service of summons. And now we need to act immediately by taking recourse to sub-rule 1 of Rule 9, read with sub-rule 3 of Rule 9. Let those rules which are framed by Bombay High Court for service through courier be implemented. In fact, in Karnataka also, I am initiating the process now of framing rules under sub-rule 3 of Rule 9. We had all the preliminary discussion with my colleagues. So that is one area which needs a lot of debate, because our institution, especially civil courts, are getting bad name because service of notice, service of summons involves huge delay. There may be exceptional cases where everything is very seamless and very smooth, but they are an exception. There is one more area where we need a lot of introspection. And that is an area of execution. If somebody asks me a question, which is the most important chapter in the Code of Civil Procedure, my answer to that will be the chapters containing the provisions regarding the sections relating to execution and Order 21. The reason is that what is most important is when a litigant comes to the court, he succeeds. And when he succeeds, the law must ensure that he must get the fruits of decree immediately. I'm just saying it in a lighter vein. If you see how our procedure works, I mean, I'm not saying the law is bad. Maybe we are not implementing in proper manner. Sometimes I feel that the procedure is such that it works against a successful party. For example, I'm a little diverting myself. That is again part of the procedure, part of reform. Cost. Can we say that a person who succeeds in a litigation, right from trial court to Supreme Court, whether he gets truly costs which will compensate him for the expenditure which he has incurred? I don't know, I'm subject to correction. When bill of cost is drawn, we follow the schedule of fees in that old Bombay Pleaders Act, old British legislation, and see the, you correct me if I am wrong, that still that practice continues of incorporating the fees which are provided in the Bombay Pleaders Act, in the schedule to Bombay Pleaders Act. See those, sarcastic I'll put it, see those astronomical figures of fees which are provided. Again, in lighter vein, I am saying, all of us know the standard of fees of High Court lawyers. But somebody who can afford to engage those high cost lawyers, somebody who can afford to pay their fees, and he succeeds in the litigation, why he can't get back those that amount which he pays to the lawyer? In this, so therefore, the system works in such a way that the person who succeeds in the proceedings faces several disadvantages. And one such classic case is execution proceedings. We should make study how much time our execution applications take. There is a provision, I think Rule 22, Clause A of Subrule 1, subject to correction, which says that if execution is filed after 2 years, service of notice to judgment debtor is mandatory. As a practicing lawyer, as a judge, I was always thinking about these provisions. Long back, I remember I attended a function in one of the newly established law colleges. One young student got up and he made a very interesting suggestion. You are not that articulate. And since then, my thinking process started. He said, sir, I want to ask you only one question. Why this requirement of a decree holder filing an application for execution? Unfortunately, he gave me example of one of my orders where the practice which I used to follow in Bombay High Court after deciding a PIL, I used to keep it for compliance. And in one of the orders, I remember some lawyer raised a serious objection that what jurisdiction your lordship has to keep the matter before yourself for reporting compliance. If compliance is not made, party will file contempt petition. I think by short order I had dealt with that portion, that particular objection. Again, in lighter vein, those who are appellate side lawyers can imagine who must be that lawyer who raised this objection. I need not name him. So he said that, sir, it's a very simple thing. When a decree is passed for the purposes of disposal, giving those points to the judge, can be treated as disposed of. But notionally, it can be registered as an execution application. When she said that, I added to that. I said, yes, you may be right. That if a suit is decreed, notionally, an execution application can be generated. And then it can be kept after first date should be after expiry of period of limitation for filing appeal. If by that time there is stay by the appellate court, the dates can be given after 6 months, and ultimately after long drawn battle, first appeal, second appeal, SLP, when the decree attains finality, the matter will be before the court because court will keep on adjourning it. And the day the court finds that decree has attained finality, there won't be any issue of service of notice to the litigant, to the judgment debtor. Why there should be a separate proceeding filed? Why the requirement of law? That you have long battle in the suit, and after you succeed, and by the time litigant succeeds in that long battle of appeals, second appeals, etc., he is mentally tired, financially he is in distress, and then again one more proceeding. So this also calls for serious debate that when we pass a decree, the court passing a decree should be responsible for ensuring that that decree is translated into actual relief to the litigant who succeeds in the suit. It may help in several ways. I'll give one example of a decree for specific performance. Now, if law is amended and the suit is given notional number after it is decreed as execution application, there won't be any occasion to serve notice. Now, in case of decree for specific performance, I think there is a provision in Order 21 that if the decree is not executed, a draft of the sale deed will be prepared, and that draft is again required to be served on the judgment debtor. Now, if we continue the proceeding of the suit and convert it into execution application, all these difficulties will not arise, but there won't be any concept of service of notice to the judgment debtor, because judgment debtor will be before the court. I mean, some innovation we'll have to think about in execution application. Otherwise, it becomes something which is very ridiculous, that you don't get the fruits of your decree. All of us know that in every district, every taluka place, there are specialist lawyers. And when the advocate for decree holder finds that the specialist lawyer is engaged by judgment debtor, with his experience, he always tells the decree holder that, look, now it's a question of 5 or 10 years easily, because this lawyer will not allow, lawyer with a great skill of defending a judgment debtor will not allow decree to be executed. Several things, I mean, we need to apply our mind. How one should facilitate early relief to a successful litigant. For example, there is a decree for possession. You know, if decree for possession is challenged, normally usual conditions are imposed while granting stay. Deposit of a certain amount, or undertaking, or restraint on parting with possession, creating third-party interest. But is that sufficient? There are cases and cases where such conditions are imposed not to part with possession, not to create third-party interest. But when it comes to execution, ultimately somebody gets up and files an application that I should be heard, Order 29, Rule 97, sorry. So will it not be a good idea where we start a practice that if decree for possession is stayed, a receiver can be appointed, property can be made custodial aegis, of course, without payment of any fees or charges or royalty to the receiver, so that the property becomes custodial aegis, and anybody creates third-party interest, anybody tries to claim, it will become criminal, it will become contempt, but custody of receiver is custody of the court. Then person who claims can be thrown out. I mean, some innovation is required. Our system is defamed because we are not able to effectively render justice by executing the decree at the earliest. Now, there are several provisions. I mean, I can simply go on and on. There are several provisions where we need to change. For example, auction. There are provisions of auction, provisions related to auction under Order 21. Is it not a time to make that process very transparent by providing for e-auction, online auction? Now go out and see, even the mining rights are auctioned now after that 2G judgment of the Supreme Court. 1957 Act has been amended, providing that now there's a provision for e-auction there. Banks are undertaking e-auction. So let us have transparency when it comes to auction through the court. Even ironing the creases is required when it comes to the procedure which is laid down for provisions regarding auction. Then one more reform, I'll just briefly touch upon that. All of us are conversant with the provisions of the Commercial Courts Act. Now, you know that there is a provision under the Commercial Courts Act by which certain provisions have been amended, certain provisions of Civil Procedure Code have been amended in its application to the commercial courts. Now, I'll just highlight only one provision because our time is limited. A very salutary provision has been introduced by amending the CPC for purposes of Commercial Courts Act. Now that provision is Subrule 3 capital D of Rule 2 of Order 18, which empowers the court to fix time limits for the oral arguments either by the parties in a case as it thinks fit. So a very, very important provision. Power has been given to the court to fix time limit for oral submission. Now that is coupled with other provisions like Subrule 3A, Subrule 3B, which enables parties to file written submissions. Now why such provisions should not be there, which will apply to all the proceedings under the CPC? All the members of legal fraternity, again I repeat what I said in the beginning, post-COVID, our courts will be badly short of time. Today we have a scenario in civil courts. I'm not talking about those notice of motions on the original side of the Bombay High Court. We know how much time it takes, how much time lawyers consume. But there's a tendency on the part of lawyers now, maybe in city like Thane, Pune, Nagpur, where I am told now some lawyers argue application at Exhibit 5 under Order 39(1) and 2. For 4 hours, 5 hours, the arguments go on. They consume such a important and precious time of the court, argue interim application for 5 hours. I don't know whether I shared this with my earlier 2 or 3 dialogues. I'm calling it always a dialogue because I'm not delivering a speech. I'm having a dialogue with all of you. Very interesting case which came before me in Bombay High Court. I must have repeated it. I know I may be repeating it. That it was appeal from order coming, if I'm mistaken, not from Pune district. Usual application order 39(1) and 2 may be in a suit for specific performance. The advocate for plaintiff had cited more than 30 judgments. Advocate for defendant had cited more than 30 judgments. So about the 70 judgments were thrown at that poor civil judge senior division for hearing of application at Exhibit 5. So when matter was called out, I said, irrespective of the result, I am going to impose cost on both the parties for citing large number of irrelevant judgments. And I did impose cost on both the parties, irrespective of the result. Now, members of the legal fraternity will have to remember one thing. You can't afford to waste the time of the court. See, all these years, see, today, lawyer in me is speaking this. All these years, no advocate would have even imagined that his income will stop because courts will stop functioning. Nobody imagined this in dreams also. Even as a bad dream, nobody must have imagined this. Now today we have a situation from 25th of March, lawyers have no income. And therefore, when we reopen the courts in staggered manner, there will be huge responsibility on the members of the bar to ensure that they don't unnecessarily consume the time of the court. I don't know when the courts will start because every state different situation, but day after tomorrow, you can have a look at website of the Karnataka High Court. What we are going to provide is some 7 or 8 matters per day in trial courts. So now the responsibilities of the members of the bar to be briefed before the court and ensure that time is not wasted, because now you must remember that anything going wrong with the system will again affect your livelihood. Please remember that. In fact, you will see our, I'm making a diversion, you will see our SOP. We have said that if the members of the bar do not follow discipline, they do not keep social distancing, they do not wear masks, we may be compelled to close the courts. Because when we reopen the courts, please remember, everybody, judges, staff, everybody should remember that by starting the courts, we should not contribute to spread of coronavirus. That we have to remember. Of course, there are limitations. All that we should do is take 100 or 101% care and then leave it to the luck. Even thereafter something happens, then we can't help it. But it is our duty to ensure that when we start, after reopening of the courts, we must ensure that we do not become instruments of spreading virus. So coming back to the reforms, a provision like Subrule 2D of Subrule 2 of Order 18 must find place, which will apply to all proceedings. Normally, I attended many workshops in Bombay. Everybody talks about courts in Singapore, courts in Australia, courts in England, courts in America, and how best the courts are functioning. I don't dispute that. In many countries, the courts may be functioning far more efficiently than what we do. But in all these developed countries, which lawyers talk about, which various stakeholders talk about, there are 2 or 3 organizations now. They go to the courts, they have some questionnaire. They claim that they analyze the functioning of the court. They have a look at bare statistics, and they keep on publishing the reports. There are 2 or 3 such organizations. One is there in Bangalore also. They don't bother to come to the authorities of the court and tell them that, look, there are conclusions, whether you want to say anything. They won't do that. They will unilaterally publish the reports. And all these reports and all these intellectual people forget that in almost in all advanced countries, you will find there are provisions which restrict the time for oral arguments. Here in our system, it is left to the skill of an individual judge to control the member of the bar. In High Court, we are in privileged position. We can do that. But if a civil judge, junior division does that, he will face a resolution by Bar Association. If he tries to curtail the members of the bar from arguing, he will face a resolution by Bar Association. He is in most vulnerable position. So therefore, now this is one area where we need to have reform. That nobody should have luxury of wasting the time of the court. Nobody should have luxury of spending more time in proceedings than required. Of course, there we as judges will have to also discipline ourselves. We'll have to also make innovations. We'll have to also make an effort that we as judges don't waste the time of the court. We as judges, we set our priorities right. We decide which cases should be properly given priority. We decide how we are not going to waste the time of the court. And most importantly, we must adopt as judges the modern case management techniques. So it's both ways. I'm not saying it's both ways. But basically, if lawyers start saving time of the court, it will immensely help the institution. And there, my personal view is that major reforms are needed there. Then one more thing I'll touch, and then I think I'll have to go to last part of my lecture because so many things can be talked about. Then one area where I think our system is lacking. Now, for example, amendment to Rule 4 of Order 18, which provided for filing affidavit in lieu of examination in chief. And I think there are similar provision made now under Negotiable Instruments Act dealing with complaints under Section 138. There is a provision to appoint commissioners. Now, all of us know that how the provision is working. There are very verbose affidavits in lieu of examination in chief filed. All of us know what happens when matter is sent to commissioner to record evidence. I did not comment upon that. I remember I was member of bar. I must also take a blame like any other member of the bar. When these amendments based on Justice Ravi Malimat committee, Justice V.S. Malimat's committee were placed before the bill was placed before the parliament, I definitely remember that it was circulated to all bar associations. It was circulated to all bar councils. If I recall it correctly, in fact, Advocates Association of Western India had made available copies of that draft. I distinctly remember to have read the draft. But like I myself, I was busy with my duties as a lawyer. I was busy in earning good livelihood. Nobody applied his mind. to the proposed amendments. Nobody thought about the consequences of having such amendments. And now we have a scenario where a very noble provision, ideally a very good provision, that court's time should not be wasted in recording of evidence, is ultimately contributing to the delay in disposal of the cases. This filing of affidavit in lieu of examination chief is also resulting in delay, because if you have very lengthy affidavit in lieu of examination chief, that also increases the cross-examination. Now, one approach to this situation should be adopted. That is what I personally feel. That whenever we have new laws or new procedural laws, I personally believe that there should be some provision for audit of the implementation of those laws. A very important provision, Order 18 Rule 4 as amended, which was intended to curtail the delays. Now some audit has to be conducted, that how many cases were referred to the commissioner and whether it has helped in saving time. Because you know what happens. The commissioner can't rule on admissibility of the documents. Commissioner can't rule on the whether the question is relevant or irrelevant every time the matter is brought to the court. So we need to have audit of all the new provisions. Now this 2002 amendment is 18 years old amendment. Today, most of the lawyers are free. I mean, lawyers can have study group, lawyers should work on it and suggest the proposed amendments. Suggest the proposed amendments to, in fact, all the provisions, all the procedural provisions. But this is the only way we can help the legislature to ensure that the laws are, procedural laws are properly framed. Because see, mainly how the procedural laws operate, it depends. I mean, the major stakeholder who can give correct feedback is the stakeholder of lawyers, important stakeholder in our judiciary. Now, one more area where I think Maharashtra is pioneer. There's great difficulty which is faced by the litigants and lawyers for depositing the amounts in the court. Maybe it may be decretal amount, maybe amount which is ordered to be deposited by the court by interim order, maintenance amount, rent amount, the amount of fine. The procedure is so cumbersome. I think Maharashtra took the lead when I was chairman of the computer committee. I remember in Pune, we started pilot project where there can be e-deposit. Sitting at home, you can deposit a decretal amount by use of your credit card, debit card, or net banking. In fact, Pune was the first district where we provided POS machines. I'll give you a simple example. The idea was even the charges for certified copy should be paid by swiping your card on the POS machine. You know what happens? That the cost of the certified copy is say 150. Then you pay a 500 rupees note. Then there's always difficulty of giving change. And then several malpractices develop. So idea was provide a POS machine and the litigant can swipe his card and pay the charges of so seamless transaction, no cash transaction. Similarly, I think provision was made in Pune for payment of fine. There are all petty offenses where fine is imposed. Small amount, 200, 300, 500. A litigant can swipe a card and pay the fine. Now there should be, it is high time there should be provision for withdrawal also, seamless provision. Person sitting at home, maybe on establishing identity, etc., should be able to withdraw the money. In fact, now in Karnataka, last week, we have a very easiest procedure devised for payment of court fees. Very easy. Maharashtra also it is there, but we have actually introduced a lot of ease in that procedure. We have also started online payment of certified copy fees. See, the idea is now we should ensure that there is minimum footfall in the court premises. For payment of rent, you know, this landlord-tenant suits, all of you are aware. Every time, every month, tenant has to come and deposit the amount. Why should person come to the court? Why should person come to the lawyer's office? Why should lawyer, his junior or his clerk should waste time on these deposits? All this should be made online, seamless procedure. It is high time that we do it, and it's quite easy. It's not difficult. In fact, I'm told that this virtual court for traffic offences has been opened in Pune. It was inaugurated by the Chief Justice. Please see how it works. I have not seen the Maharashtra pattern, but our pattern is ready. We are inaugurating it next week. The traffic challans are issued. Now those traffic challans, police will upload on the system. Judge sitting at his house or in courtroom will have access to those challans. All that the offender or the person to whom challan is served, he has to click button, go online. He must plead guilty. If he pleads guilty, the judge, by clicking one or two buttons, can fix the fine. Immediately that order is released, he can make e-payment of the fine and he's out. In many cities like Bombay, if I am not wrong, about 4,000, 5,000 people must be coming to the court only in relation to these traffic offences, where he pleads guilty, pays fine and goes, unless he pays the fine to the police. So we can avoid entry of 4,000, 5,000 people to the court. And most of these offences, no parking, etc., they are committed by all white-collar people. The most important advantage is they don't waste their day going to the court. They can sit at home, access online, accept the guilt, judge will decide the fine and pay the fine and finish off the matter in a span of 1 hour. So that is one step taken in Maharashtra. In fact, such courts ideally should be there in all places. And state has also its advantage. People are now, once such system takes place, people will immediately pay the fine because they will get rid of headache. Fine is also collected without any efforts. The fine goes to treasury account or whichever account. Every state will have different procedure. So state is also immensely benefited. And now about the reforms. Now, of course, all of you know that now video conferencing is going to be the order of the day. Most of you must have heard me yesterday. Now the E-Committee of the Supreme Court, headed by His Lordship Justice Chandrachud, has formulated model rules, which he has told every Chief Justice to adopt by way of practice guidelines or by framing the rules. We in Karnataka, we have framed the rules in terms of that. Only they are to be gazetted. So the idea of the Supreme Court E-Committee is that there should be uniform procedure followed in all entire country and India for these video conferencing rules. I'm not going to repeat what I said yesterday. I'm running out of time. I know that there are difficulties. Technical difficulties are there. There may not be adequate bandwidth. Issue of connectivity is there. But these are all temporary things. One difficulty which I always hear from local bar association people, I have been interacting with them on practically daily basis. Sir, they say, sir, you know, most of the lawyers do not know how to operate this. I told him that I have very serious objection to this. If a lawyer can operate YouTube on his cell phone, he can send messages via Facebook or WhatsApp. It's so easy. The password and ID is shared, whichever platform you are using. You may be using Jitsi platform, you may be using this Zoom. It is so easy. If you can operate your email account, you can operate your WhatsApp account. It is so easy to log in for video conferencing hearing. Glitches are bound to be there. I mean, the system is not perfect. Glitches are bound to be there. There may be loss of connectivity. So many things are there. But by and large, I'm talking about my own state of Karnataka. By and large, it is successful. In 5% cases, you know, there is disruption. I hear all those PILs related to COVID-19. On one date, we had a serious problem. There are 30 lawyers logged in. There are many parties are there in that PIL concerning COVID-19. So Jitsi failed. So we had to close the hearing and we shifted to Zoom and then conducted our hearing. See, because there are glitches, because there are teething issues, the system doesn't become bad. If the legal profession is to survive, the members of the bar must wholeheartedly accept this and go to your chief justice or go to your district judge by only pointing out what improvements we need to carry out. My appeal to you is not, don't attack the system. This is going to stay. Even if tomorrow lockdown norms are eased in Maharashtra, some districts which are in red zone, they become green zone. Still, no court is going to allow functioning of the court in usual manner. It will have to be partly by video conferencing and partly by regular hearing, physical hearing. So this video conferencing, then e-filing. E-filing is also now, Supreme Court will shortly issue model rules. A committee has been constituted. I've been interacting with some of the members of the committee. And I personally feel that e-filing, once it happens, in reality, the lawyers in Maharashtra should be very enthusiastic, because the entire e-filing portal, entire e-filing system of the Supreme Court is developed by Mr. Goswami, who is part of Maharashtra Judiciary, is a district judge on deputation working in Supreme Court. He has designed the entire functioning of the e-filing of the Supreme Court. So e-filing very shortly will have Supreme Court guidelines. Today also there is some kind of e-filing in Maharashtra also, I'm told, but that's a makeshift e-filing where you send your files by email and somebody downloads it, takes printout and registers it. So this video conferencing, e-filing, my appeal to you is that notwithstanding the initial glitches, please accept it wholeheartedly. See, ultimately, I, as a member of the legal fraternity, I am worried about the income of the lawyers. I mean, lawyers are hit badly. I must say that. I've been sharing all this with the members of the bar here, hit badly. Now, if you are hit badly, you must accept the new system. We will work within limitations. We know that everybody will not get video conferencing hearing. Every matter cannot be heard by video conferencing. But maximum number of matters within limitations, because we know in Karnataka also, yesterday I had a meeting. I was told that at a time, 8 or 9 courts can simultaneously work in High Court, in principal seat at Bengaluru. I can't have more than 8 or 9 courts working simultaneously with video conferencing hearing. So all the lawyers will not get hearing of their matters, but let us start it. At least few lawyers will start getting their income. And please remember one more thing. We all work for litigants. We must ensure that now litigants must get some relief. So my appeal to the members of the bar is that please be ready for accepting the changes, and you yourself should become instrument of change. So these are broadly my views about what should happen in future. There are several subjects. Yesterday I dealt with the subject that why should we have a situation where in a private complaints like offense under section 138, we have attendance of complainant and accused every day. Magistrate, 100 cases are there on the boards of criminal courts. They spend time only calling the people who are on bail. Now that system is not going to work. Yesterday I said that somebody is released on bail. We are compelling him to come to the court every day. We don't know whether he stays in containment zone. We don't know how he travels. He may be traveling by some truck infected by COVID-19 people. So now we'll have adopt a very, very careful approach that minimum footfall of people in the court complex. That's going to be the motto. That's going to be the principle on which all the judges, all the principal district judges or chief justice will have to work. Minimum presence of parties, minimum presence of lawyers in the court. That is going to be the order of the day. So friends, now it is already 1 hour and 20 minutes. I think I have exceeded the time. Mr. Vagyani had given me time of one hour. I think there are some questions waiting. And lastly, again, now I turn to Marathi. I have been interacting with the people. मी इथे कर्नाटकामध्ये अनेक संस्था आहेत ज्या या लॉकडाऊन मध्ये ज्या समस्या निर्माण झालेल्या आहेत, स्त्रियांच्या समस्या आहेत आणि मुख्य समस्या म्हणजे एक प्रकारचं नैराश्य दाटून आलेलं आहे लोकांच्या मनामध्ये. वकिलांच्या बाबतीत मी अनुभव घेतोय हा. आम्ही आमच्याकडे उच्च न्यायालयामध्ये फिजिकल फायलिंग चालू केलेलं आहे अपॉइंटमेंट देऊन. पहिले 2-3 दिवस मी 1 तास तिथे काउंटरपाशी उभा राहत असे बघण्याकरता, वकिलांशी इंटरॅक्शन होत असे. काही वकील मंडळी आता मानसिक स्वास्थ्य ढळण्याच्या परिस्थितीत आहेत. तर मला आपल्याला एकच सांगायचं आहे की काल सांगितलं, पुन्हा एकदा सांगतो, अनेक लोकांनी ऐकलेलं आहे. आपण मानवजातीचा इतिहास लक्षात घ्या. 1897ची काय त्यानंतर आलेल्या प्लेगच्या साथी असो, कुठलीही साथ, इन्फ्लुएन्झा साथ आली, अनेक लोकांना जीव गमवायला लागले. पण आपण पाहिलं असेल, कुठलंही संकट असेल, नैसर्गिक संकट असेल, प्रत्येक संकटावरती या मानवजातीने विजय मिळवलेला आहे. आणि ही गोष्ट आपण मनात बाळगली पाहिजे. ठीक आहे, मला कल्पना आहे की महाराष्ट्रामध्ये 2 महिने झाले अजून न्यायालयाचं कामकाज सुरू होत नाहीये. पण आता मला जे कळलं त्याप्रमाणे आता व्हिडिओ कॉन्फरन्सचं प्रमाण पण वाढणार आहे थोड्या दिवसातच. महाराष्ट्रामध्ये पण ते होणार आहे. बँडविड्थ वाढली की ते पण प्रमाण वाढेल. तर कुठल्याही परिस्थितीत निराशेचं मळभ आपल्या मनावर येऊन देऊ नका. आजची जी परिस्थिती आहे ही कायम राहणार नाहीये. आजची जी परिस्थिती आहे ती परिस्थिती एक ना एक दिवस बदलणार आहे. फक्त ही परिस्थिती ओव्हरनाईट बदलत नसते. ही परिस्थिती हळूहळू सुधारणार आहे आणि त्यामुळे कोर्टाचं कामकाज पूर्वत्वाला नेण्याचं काम पण आपल्याला हळूहळू करावं लागणार आहे, टप्प्याटप्प्याने करावं लागणार आहे. आणि त्यामुळे माझी आपल्याला अशी विनंती आहे, नैराश्य मनातून काढून टाका. आपण एक ना एक दिवस यातून बाहेर पडणार आहोत. आणि समजा बाहेर पडणार उशीर झाला तर सुप्रीम कोर्टाची ई कमिटी काम करते, प्रत्येक हायकोर्टाची ई कमिटी काम करतायत. आपण जास्तीत जास्त व्हिडिओ कॉन्फरन्सिंग हिअरिंग करू. आपण ही मगाशी ऑनलाईन पेमेंटची सिस्टीम चालू करू. आपण ऑनलाईन फायलिंगची सिस्टीम चालू करू. पण आपण सगळ्यांनी जर निर्धार केला तर आपण ह्या प्रश्नावरती उपाय काढू शकू अशी मला 100% खात्री आहे. आणि ही खात्री बाळगूनच आपण सगळ्यांनी जीवन जगूया आणि नैराश्य आपण मनातून काढून टाकूया, एवढंच आपल्याला सांगायचं आहे. आणि पुन्हा एकदा काल सांगितलं ते पुन्हा एकदा सांगतोय, कारण तो माझा अतिशय जिव्हाळ्याचा विषय आहे. कोर्टात बसून मी जे काय ऐकतोय ते भयानक आहे. आज लोकांना खायला अन्न नाहीये, लोकांना रेशन मिळत नाही. ज्यांना रेशन मिळतंय त्यांना गॅस सिलेंडर विकत घ्यायची ऐपत नाहीये. आज परिस्थिती अशी आहे की म्हणजे भुके करता सामान्य माणूस सरकारकडे बघावं लागतंय, अशी परिस्थिती आहे. काल मी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे अनेक महिला आहेत त्यांना मेंटेनन्स मिळत नाहीये. सिनियर सिटीजन आहेत त्यांना त्यांच्या मुलांकडनं मेंटेनन्स मिळत नाहीये. उद्या जेव्हा कोर्टच न्यायालय चालू होतील आपल्याला ह्या वंचित घटकांकरता काहीतरी करावं लागणार आहे. फक्त न्यायालयच त्यांच्याकरता काहीतरी करू शकतात. एखाद्या स्त्रीला जर मेंटेनन्स मिळत नसेल तर त्या केसला आपल्याला प्रायोरिटी द्यावी लागेल. त्यामुळे न्यायालयाचं कामकाज थोडंफार सुरू झाल्यानंतर आपल्या पुढे हे मोठे प्रश्न आहेत. या समाजाच्या वंचित घटकांना आपण कसा न्याय देणार आहोत, त्या दृष्टीने सुद्धा विचारमंथन होणं अत्यंत गरजेचं आहे. शेवटी आपण सर्वांनीच विचार केला पाहिजे की न्यायाधीश काय किंवा वकील काय, आपलं अस्तित्व टिकणार आहे जर कोर्ट चालू राहिली तरच आपलं अस्तित्व आहे. त्या अस्तित्वाला काहीतरी महत्व आहे, काहीतरी रिलेव्हन्स आहे. आणि त्यामुळे शांतपणे आपण सर्वांनी एकत्र राहून न्यायालयाला सहाय्य करा, एवढीच मला आपल्याला सांगायचं आहे. आता आणि पुन्हा एकदा मी या स्टडी सर्कलला ज्येष्ठ विधिज्ञ वसंतराव पाटील जे स्टडी सर्कल चालू केलेलं आहे आणि आज मी या स्टडी सर्कलच्या माध्यमातून या वकील मंडळाशी बोलतो याचा मला फार आनंद होतो. कारण गेल्या वर्षी एप्रिलमध्ये एक उद्घाटन केलं होतं. आपल्या सगळ्यांचे लाडके न्यायमूर्ती अजय खानविलकर त्यावेळेला त्यांच्या हस्ते उद्घाटन झालं होतं. आणि ही स्टडी सर्कल ही कल्पनाच मला एवढी भावलेली आहे तेव्हापासून. कुठल्याही वकील संघटनेचे लोक आले की त्यांना मी एकच सांगतो की तुम्ही स्टडी सर्कल चालू करा, अशा तऱ्हेचं काहीतरी एक विधायक कार्य चालू करा. आणि ते विधायक कार्य मला जे कळलं त्याप्रमाणे वर्षभर गेल्या एप्रिलपासून अतिशय चांगल्या पद्धतीने चालू आहे. आणि हे जे संचालक आहेत त्यांना आपण आणि सांगली वकील संघटनेला सहकार्याशिवाय ही जी काय हा जो काय प्रकल्प चालू केलेला आहे तो प्रकल्प चालूच शकला नसता. त्यामुळे आपण सांगली बारचे पदाधिकारी ही जी संस्था आहे ॲडव्होकेट वसंतराव पाटलांच्या नावाने स्थापन केलेली, त्याचे जे आयोजक आहेत त्यांना सगळ्यांना आपण धन्यवाद दिले पाहिजेत. आणि काल सांगितल्याप्रमाणे मी पुन्हा एकदा सांगतो, आपल्याला मोह टाळत नाहीये पुन्हा बोलल्याचं, काल बोललो ते की या अतिशय निराशाजनक वातावरणाचे काही जे फायदे आहेत ते फायदा असा की व्याख्यान संस्कृती महाराष्ट्रामध्ये परत आलेली आहे. 4,000 5,000 लोक आनंदाने व्याख्यान ऐकतायत, त्याचा फायदा घ्या. पुस्तक संस्कृती रुजवायची सर्वात चांगली संधी आहे. आपल्या स्टडी सर्कलच्या माध्यमातून आपण कायदेविषयक जी पुस्तकं आहेत, काही अनेक आत्मचरित्र आहेत, रोजेस इन डिसेंबर असेल, माय ओन बॉसवेल असेल, आपल्या महाराष्ट्रातल्या काही न्यायिक अधिकाऱ्यांनी पुस्तकं लिहिली आहेत, त्या पुस्तकांवर चर्चा सत्र घडवून आणा. वाचन संस्कृती रुजवायची एक फार चांगली वेळ आहे. आपल्या वकिलांमध्ये काही साहित्यिक आहेत, त्या साहित्यिकांना हे व्यासपीठ उपलब्ध करून द्या. का आज आपल्याकडे श्रोतेवर्ग आहे, जो श्रोतेवर्ग आपण एखाद्या चांगल्या संस्थेमध्ये, एखाद्या चांगल्या वाचनालयामध्ये व्याख्यानमाला आयोजित करतो, रिकामे हॉल असतात, आज 5,000 लोक येणार आहेत. तर वकिलांमधले साहित्यिक आहेत, वकिलांमधले कवी आहेत, त्यांनाही आपण संधी देऊ शकतो, त्यांची कवी संमेलनं करू शकतो. एवढीच मला सूचना आपल्याला वकील संघटनेला आणि या संस्थेला करायची. तर आता आपण 2-4 प्रश्न असतील त्याचे उत्तर द्यायला हरकत नाही आता.
Yes, sir. Indeed, the subject being so complex and the provisions being of the intricacy and difficult to understand and apply it in the court proceedings. Sir, your lecture has made all the advocates and especially the junior advocates to know and understand the provisions of the Civil Procedure Code and the amendments therein in a very simple manner and in its letter and spirit as expected in the principles of law. Sir, there are some questions being put up by the advocates on the subject issue. Sir, I request you to please give them the guidance and make them the issues, understand them. May I request Dr. Sheetal Babar to take over?
Yes, sir. Thank
Yes.
you so much, Abhinandan, sir. Your Lordship, after this enlightening and knowledgeable lecture, I must say I am speechless. But then there are few queries, there are few questions
Please.
put up by the lawyers practicing. So I take this opportunity and seek your permission. Your Lordship, I would start up with a question by Dr. Ashok Yende, who is Dean Faculty of Law, Mumbai University. Lordship, his question is, sir, in the wake of coronavirus pandemic, Honorable Supreme Court passed directions to extensively use video conferencing for judicial proceedings. The higher courts are according to these directions. However, we need to upgrade the infrastructure in the subordinate courts so as to provide robust security system, capacity building for these training programs for the lower judiciary. How judiciary and government is dealing up with this challenge or task?
See, to some extent, what Dr. Yande has said is right. I mean, we are not able to provide, use different words, e-infrastructure or necessary hardware and software to our trial courts and district courts. But I think all the courts in Maharashtra, they are equipped with the 3-in-1 and other hardware which is given, which is quite good. The judges can sit in the court hall and conduct the video conferencing hearing. Only issue is of connectivity and proper bandwidth. And I'm told that the issue is taken up by the E-Committee of the Supreme Court. And one very good development I must share with you. His Lordship Justice R.C. Chauhan, who is retired judge of High Court of Bombay, and he is one of the pioneers in introducing use of computers in the courts. Now, he is the vice chairman of the E-Committee of the Supreme Court. And I'm told, I had a long discussion with him in the last week. I think issues of connectivity and bandwidth, he has taken up with the central government. We in Karnataka, we have requested him that now it will be very difficult to get money from the state government. It will be very unjust as a Chief Justice for me, tell the Chief Secretary to provide large money, because today the situation is they are not able to even pay salaries. I mean, no, in fact, we have strict instructions by releasing a budget that we can't spend any amount. We have serious challenges faced on the administrative side. So I requested the Vice Chairman whether some money can come from the E-Committee for providing hardware. But as I said, I mean, I'm part of a judicial system that I must candidly admit that every place, every taluka place, there will not be proper infrastructure. But we have to create that infrastructure. In time being, I can only say that we have to work within the limitations of infrastructure which we have. And I'm sure that, I mean, some method can be devised that in taluka places, if there is sufficient bandwidth, it is not there. Judge 1 will sit for 2 hours. Thereafter, Judge 2 will sit for 2 hours. Maybe we start early in the morning at 9:30. and stage the court proceedings to 6:30. Some formula will have to be evolved. It all depends on the local situation. In fact, I wanted to say that many things I must have said about Karnataka, my own state, but you can't compare Karnataka with Maharashtra, because today we are on the verge of reaching figure of 2,000 positive cases in the entire state. The city of Bangalore has, I think, 250 cases, out of which 50% are cured. The Bangalore Municipal Corporation limit. So as a Chief Justice, I'm in far better position here to start some kind of a staggered functioning of the court. It will take a long time in Maharashtra, and lawyers should be ready for that. But as Dr. Yande has said, I'm sure the efforts are on by even Bombay High Court for securing better infrastructure to ensure that there are more and more video conferencing courts. Yes, any other question?
Right, sir. Rightly quoted, Your Lordship. I would like to go on to the second question, which is quoted by Advocate Ruta Pandit from Pune Bar. She is asking the question, the crux of section 16 of CPC is place of suing. More significance under the section is given to residence, business location, or workplace of defendant. What is the jurisprudence behind giving more emphasis on location, workplace, or especially residence of defendant instead of the applicant?
But now I don't think I should answer this question. This is not connected with today's topic. But I will address you on CPC, jurisdiction issue. Someday we'll answer that. But please concentrate on the questions which relate to today's subject.
Absolutely, Your Lordship. I take this note. Your Lordship, there is another question which is put up by Advocate Swapnil Chile from Kolhapur. He asks, Order 17, Rule 1 CPC, as amended in 2002,
yes,
provides that no adjournment shall be granted more than 3 times to a party during hearing of the suit. Is this provision directory or is it mandatory? Moreover, why is that this provision is never followed in trial courts?
See, as a judge, if all the members of the bar in Karnataka agree, I will follow it to the hilt. I'll ask all the judicial officers to follow it to the hilt. See, ultimately, all procedural provisions, as they say, procedure is a handmaid of justice. If you are in ideal situation, this provision has to be implemented, no doubt about it. But we don't live in ideal situation, because if we become very strict and very harsh, denying the adjournments, we may end up in doing great injustice to the common man who is the litigant before the court. But I'm very glad this question is asked, because I wanted to say something which I forgot in the flow of what I said. Now, post-COVID, the lawyers will have to ensure that there are minimum number of adjournments. I'll tell you the reason. Because suppose we have a situation, again, I am giving example of my own state or SOP. If you read it day after tomorrow, there will be only 10 cases which should be taken up. So the meaning is, if in that court, ideally there should be 60 cases on cause list and only 10 cases are taken. And naturally, if adjournment is granted in those 10 cases, a very longer date will be given. So now, time has come, not for judicial officers, but for lawyers to follow Order 17, Rule 1 and seek minimum number of adjournments. I'm not saying that judges should not be, as judges, we can't be harsh in present day when people are finding it difficult to travel. But those lawyers who are in position to appear, they must ensure that minimum number of adjournments are taken. So answer to that question is, in ideal situation, this provision has to be implemented very strictly. But whether COVID or no COVID, in our country, our courts do not work in ideal situation. So therefore, implementation of that will become very difficult. Instead of that, we should first start implementing only one provision, that limitation on time consumed by the advocates in oral arguments. That will also help for speedy justice. Yes, any other question?
Right, sir. Your Lordship, there is one more question from a solicitor, Advocate Kamini Ahuja. She asks, Sir, in case of service of summons by email, it is sometimes difficult to prove effective service. Since the defendant may deliberately not provide a delivery or a read receipt, providing these receipts are at the discretion of the recipient. How this thing could be dealt up with?
Yes, this is a very, very important question which is raised. In fact, in Karnataka High Court, we have already started deliberations on framing rules. And fortunately for me, the practice here is that e-governance team of the government of Karnataka assists us. Now, I am not a techno-savvy person, but I was told by the representative of e-governance team of government of Karnataka, there is a solution to this. There is a solution to this. I can't explain it to you because I have not seen it, how it works. They are going to show us demonstration. But time being, as we have a system, for example, Bombay High Court follows that system. To service for facilitating service additional mode. So we can always take request to additional mode by service through email to begin with by framing rules. And secondly, as I said, in case of agencies and instrumental state, I mean, the municipal, say for example, municipal corporation of Kolhapur, I'll give an example. That corporation cannot be heard to say that we don't open our email account and we see what are the emails received. As a public authority, they are bound to do so. So in case of public authorities, at least we can make it mandatory. Service only by that mode. So again, it's a technical issue. It will have to be made technically. And I'm sure with the modern technology, we'll find answer to that.
Right, Your Lordship. I would like to go ahead with one more question. This question is raised up by Advocate Sarika Shingade from Sangli. Amendment to Order 6, Rule 18 states that when a party had application for amendment and it is allowed by the court through an order, but the party doesn't amend it within the time prescribed, that is 14 days from issuance of the order, then will the party be not permitted to amend? And if this so, what would be legal consequences on the suit proceedings?
So ultimately, the question is, as I take it, it's a question which basically deals with the issue whether it is mandatory or directory. So again, this is not an issue for consideration today. So call me to deliver a lecture on CPC. I'll answer a series of such questions. But let us come to the point about reforms.
Humbly accepted, Your Lordship. I would like to go ahead with one more question. This is from Advocate Vaibhav Pratap Singh Suryavamshi. The administration isn't also responsible for increase in litigation, especially encroachment of agricultural land, right, where in too many cases are pending, and how to overcome this?
No, which administration is responsible? I did not hear it completely. Please repeat it.
So the question as per him is specifically whether administration isn't also responsible for increase in litigation. So I suppose...
administration means, I mean, he is referring to executive.
Yes, Your Lordship.
Right. Because so many allegations have been made against judiciary, but this allegation is not made. The judiciary is responsible for creating more and more litigation.
Absolutely agree.
In a lighter way, I answer this. Any lawyer should welcome such inaction on the part of authorities that will create more litigation, which is presently necessary. See, he has made a good point in the sense that, see, most of the litigation you see, which we have, that litigation arises because individual who has right in respect of the property, may not be now fundamental right, but a constitutional right under Article 300A. He doesn't get help of the statutory authorities to preserve and protect his rights. When rights are being encroached upon by another individual, he doesn't get that kind of protection. And to that extent, the question is right, that today we have a scenario where maybe under some law, Land Revenue Code, there may be power vesting in any of the revenue authorities, I don't recollect, to ensure that encroachment on agricultural land is removed. If that provision is not implemented, ultimately it will lead to litigation in the civil court. So it is true that the law enforcing agencies are not able to discharge their duties properly, maybe due to constraints, as judiciary has constraints. I said talked about the just population ratio. They are also short in numbers. They are also short on infrastructure. But it's a matter of fact that due to inaction of the authorities in exercising their power, litigation is increasing, no doubt about it.
Rightly quoted, Your Lordship. With your permission, I would like to conclude with question answer session. This is a question put up by Dr. Santosh Shah, sir, Advocate Kolhapur. He raises a question. After amendment of CPC in 2002, the courts are empowered to appoint court commissioners for recording of evidence.
Right.
However, this provision is not used in district places. Much of the time of the court is therefore taken in recording evidence. So would you kindly put up some light on this issue?
Yes, it is again my personal opinion, but I think in city of Mumbai, perhaps this provision has failed in the sense that there are long and large number of sittings by the court commissioners. But it is true that in the districts, we are not implementing it. And please don't mean any disrespect to anybody. I have highest respect for all lawyers. Maybe in districts, it will work because even as of today, whatever I remember when I was in Maharashtra, as compared to lawyers in bigger districts like Bombay, Pune, in smaller places, the lawyers are still very discreet. I mean, they are very brief. If you go to the pleading, whereas the best pleading comes from some of the taluka places, very brief, very precise, and to the point. In the same way, if this provision is implemented, maybe it will work more effectively in our district and taluka courts. And therefore, actually, the Judicial Academy must act Maharashtra Judicial Academy and suggest to the judges that please take recourse to this provision. Let us at least try whether it works in district and taluka courts, because there are good lawyers available who will be volunteering to do work of a court commissioner. See, in smaller places, this system may work effectively for different reasons. You know, a small bar, say of 100 or 200 lawyers, if the judge appoints a respectable senior as a court commissioner, and I'm sure that, I have seen the lawyers at district and taluka places, many senior lawyers, they are willing to do any work for the court if properly told by the judges. If a senior lawyer is appointed as a commissioner in a small place, he will carry all the respect. So all those fights which take place before the commissioners in Mumbai about admissibility of the documents, what question is relevant or irrelevant, a senior lawyer with his seniority can always control the members of bar, tell him that, look, please don't ask this question, this may not be relevant. And considering his seniority, the lawyer will accept it. So it is worth, I'm glad that Mr. Shah has asked this question. It is worth experimenting. Our judges should become proactive, and especially post-COVID, that perhaps evidence can be recorded in office of a lawyer by keeping social distancing. We can avoid footfall in the court. That's a good suggestion. This needs to be done.
Right, Your Lordship.
I am not that negative that this provision has failed. It may be successful. Perhaps we as a lawyers and judges, we are not understood how it is to be implemented effectively. That may be the reason for its failure. Yes.
Rightly quoted, Your Lordship. This needs to be more symbiotic process. I would take it by that way. Your Lordship, all organizers, WhatsApp as well as chat boxes are just flooding up with many young lawyers. Shubham Patil and so many others are insisting in expecting your sessions, more and more sessions of yours. It is a request from all of these budding lawyers as well as law students and the fresher senior lawyers. They want you, Your Lordship, to be on this platform many more times. We would request you, if we get any chance of you to be on the same platform, virtual platform, to meet us, all of us. We would, this again is a question from these budding lawyers. When do we probably see you next on this virtual platform?
See, as far as now it's a great success of modern technology that now webinars are in place. So my assurance to you, whenever my presence is required for such kind of sessions, I'm always available on holidays. Only one condition, again in a lighter vein, please don't misunderstand me. Don't compel me to come to Sangli. Sitting at Bangalore, I'll be too happy to join you on any number of occasions. Because if I come to Sangli and come back to state of Karnataka, I'll be put in 14 days. So,
right.
so long as you allow me to address you on this platform, Zoom platform, any platform, I mean, most welcome. Please contact me, Sangli Bar or this organization can contact me. I'll be always available. Thank you.
Such a kind gesture, Your Lordship. We would like to see you again and again. I take this opportunity. I apologize for any inappropriate gesture, inappropriate words of mine. I apologize for those, sir. I proceed the session of vote of thanks, and I hand over the session to Advocate Kuldeep Nikam. Thank you so much, Your Lordship.
Please, in fact, it is indeed my pleasure to express vote of thanks to the Honorable Chief Justice of Karnataka High Court, Honorable Sri Justice Abhay Ok, on behalf of Sangli Bar Association and Advocate Vasantrao Patil Lawyers Training Center, Sangli. Now, I could see many senior and junior participants in the webinar from Bombay High Court Bar Association as well. And they would agree with me that this, in fact, gave us an opportunity to relive our memories in courtroom number 13. Because, just remaining present in the courtroom, we could learn so many things. Lordship, the Sangli Bar Association and Vasantrao Patil Lawyers Training Center were fortunate to have Your Lordship, Justice Ok and Honorable Justice Khanvilkar for the inauguration ceremony of this Lawyers Training Center. And that left us with a great sense of responsibility, which we are trying to attain by having the dignitaries like Honorable Justice Ok, and also getting an opportunity to learn from the extensive knowledge imparted by the dignitaries. I, on behalf of the Sangli Bar Association and Advocate Vasantrao Patil Lawyers Training Center, express our heartfelt gratitude to Lordship Justice Ok for sparing time from his extremely busy schedule and from his pressing commitments to be with us today on the platform of this webinar. Lordship, your guidance in respect of the reforms required in our legal field during and also post-COVID-19 situation will certainly help us to deal with the post-pandemic working of the courts. Your guidance on the innovative and useful amendments made be in CPC, made be service or even through the execution part, will surely help us in our professional life. I take this opportunity to also thank our technical support team for providing an uninterrupted sessions. I also thank all the conveners of this webinar for putting their all efforts to have our today's session, a successful session. And last but not the least, all the participants in today's webinar for joining the webinar and making this a great success. I thank you one and all. And I will now seek Lordship's permission to conclude today's session. Shall we conclude, Your Lordship?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Lordship.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.